All right. Hi, I'm Caitlin.
And I'm Lacey.
And this is Women in the Trailer Industry.
Today we have a very special guest. We have Tammy. She is our accountant. She has worked here for about 1 year so far. We are totally happy to have her.
Yes.
So Tammy, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So accounting is my second career. My first career, I spent the first 8 years out of high school in the military. I was in the Navy, where I became an inspector. I inspected pressurized things, piping, pressure vessels, boilers, those kinds of things. When I got out of the Navy, I did the same job as an inspector in refineries, in oil refineries. I worked for Valero and a small independent refinery actually in the state of Hawaii for several years.
Awesome.
Then I got married, had kid number 2, and we decided to sort of semi-retire from refining and bought a working cattle ranch in Madison County. And here I am 20 years later. We ran our own businesses, still actually have one small business that we run, my husband and I run together. But it was time for me, after my kids all graduated and went off to college or got married or whatever they did, it's time for me to go back to work for someone else because I was tired of working for myself. So here I am.
It's kind of the opposite of what people strive to do,
It
right?
can be the life until it's not the life, and then you want to go back to the life again.
Exactly right.
Yes.
So watch out what you wish for.
Yeah.
You get it. Sometimes it's not always what you think it's going to be.
Yes, absolutely.
So you have, how many kids do you have?
Yeah, so I have 3 kids. My youngest one is 20. Then my other one's 22, and my son's 28, I think. Yes. One precious, almost 1-year-old grandchild. So my kids took a big step back when she was born. Yep. The grandbaby's it.
Yeah.
Kids don't really matter so much anymore.
That's what my mom says too. It's like, I love you, but
yeah, I like you a lot, but I really love this baby.
Here's my grandbabies. Yeah.
Exactly.
Crazy. Well, coming from the Navy, and then
Thank you for your service, by the way.
My pleasure. Do it again if I could.
and being in primarily male-dominated industries, how did you overcome any bias in those situations? Did you have any situations?
Yes.
And how did you handle that?
In 1984, didn't mean to cut you off, Caitlin, but I went in 84, and women were just being allowed to go on ships.
Yeah.
And almost all job opportunities were opened up with a few exceptions. So my first, I would say I would call them mid-level managements that I worked for. They're not officers. They're senior enlisted people.
Yeah.
Most of those guys were Vietnam, and they were all men, by the way. Most of them were Vietnam veterans, and most of them had a problem with women doing male-dominated roles in the military.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they were okay if you were the secretary or the yeoman, or the dispersing clerk or whatever. No, I was a pipe fitter. That's how I started. I was a fitter. And the first chief I worked for, it was difficult. But you know what? I knew it was going to be. I mean, even going through school, there were 3 of us that were the first females to go through the school that taught us how to fit pipe. And most of the chiefs there were not happy that we were there. They knew that there was not a whole lot they could do in it. They made it difficult every chance they got. So you know what? We just bound together and said,
we're just going to make it work.
Yeah, we're going to make this work. They're not going to run us out of here. And I'm so close with those 3 other girls today for those very reasons, because we did overcome a lot, and they did not get to any of us. And if they did, they didn't know it. We never let them know. So I think that's always sort of been my motto, is like, no matter how bad it hurts, or you can't let them know that.
Don't let them know it, and just keep on
Just
going.
keep on going, because you can overcome it.
Yeah.
So I have very little, I think, as you guys probably both know, I have very little tolerance for you can't do that.
Yeah.
Yes, you can. Oh, you absolutely can. And you just find a way to make it happen.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes it's not easy, but...
No, it's not. And you know what? And those are the things you'll get the most satisfaction from. But anyways, it got, I shouldn't say easier. It was more accepted the longer that I was in the military. But then when I got out, I sort of kind of had sort of the same things. I was one of the very few female inspectors. I mean, I was a certified welding inspector.
Yeah,
so
especially when you go into the refinery.
Most of the welders are guys.
Right.
As a matter of fact, I can only think of really one female welder. And those guys did not like me telling them that what they had just done did not meet the criteria.
Yeah.
And so they would always challenge me why, where they wouldn't so much with a male inspector. But the same thing, I'd already been down that road, so you just go on with it.
So how do you combat that when they're basically looking at you and they're saying, like, what gives you the right to say this, or how would you know?
Like you said, so you pull the card and you say, because I'm a certified welding inspector, and that's my job.
Mm-hmm.
Just like your job is. And I tried to always, the thing I had to learn early on was don't make it personal.
Mm-hmm.
Don't make it about the welder. You make it about the product that was put out. And sometimes it wasn't their fault. Things
Right.
went wrong that were beyond their control. So, especially if you felt it get kind of tense, that's kind of the way that I always tried to swing it. Like, well, maybe this happened or maybe that happened, something that wasn't necessarily his fault.
I think that's super important too to think about is to change your approach.
Yeah, you
depending on your
because
situation.
obviously they were physically bigger and stronger than me. So really, I mean, if you're gonna go there, you better be ready to go there.
And you obviously have to do your job. You can't just not do your job.
Yeah. And I think that's the other thing is you have to be very sure of yourself. And so the minute that they feel like there's any deflection in what you're doing, you're in big trouble. So you can't have that either.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like you've had tons of experience in a lot of different industries, and I love that you're confident and you're very comfortable talking with us today. What advice would you give someone who, I guess, just wants to be successful in general? Like, you sound very successful in all your endeavors. You came in like a wrecking ball here, and
when we needed you the most, we needed
getting things lined out.
Yeah.
So, what's your best advice you would give the audience?
Preparation. Be prepared, and you always say you have to be thick-skinned, like it or not. I mean, you're going to get your feelings hurt in life, so just go ahead and get over it.
Yeah,
and keep on going. I mean, I think that's the thing. But preparation. I mean, we're all going to make mistakes, and when you make one, own it right then and there. Own up to it. I did it, and go on with life.
Yeah.
But you can't be on shaky ground. You have to stand your ground, to be prepared. Like I said, and you have to have thick skin.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Something I've noticed from people who come from several different industries and have a lot of experience, I feel like they're more successful because they have more experience combating different issues. I've seen you do several things here that I felt like you've used experience from your small business and prior to that. So it's very interesting.
Really diverse too.
Mm-hmm. It is, and it is different, and that helps. But I think another thing is because you're gonna fail. You're gonna have struggles, and learning to combat those struggles is how you gain that experience. Because if you never struggle, you're never gonna learn.
That's right, or grow really.
Right? No, exactly. You won't. So I like the sports analogies. I mean, that's the thing is that you have to fail to succeed, and if you don't, you don't fail. You don't try, you don't fail.
Yeah.
If you don't fail, you don't learn.
That's right.
Pretty much that simple.
For sure. I know that your children are grown, but bringing yourself back to whenever you were juggling the kids in school and daycares and then work, and what would you say your best advice is for a mom trying to juggle all the things?
Breathe. And you're not going to get it all done. And don't expect perfection. I mean, prioritize.
Yeah.
What are the big priorities? Because, and obviously taking care of your kids is the big priorities, but and let them help and expect them to help. Don't try to do everything for everybody.
Yeah.
Because I will tell you the one big mistake I made in the 20 years that I shouldn't say I took off, but that I worked at home is I let everybody else's priorities become, outweigh mine. And you can't because you'll lose yourself in that.
Yeah.
So make yourself a priority. You can't all the time, every day. I understand that. But sometimes you just have to say, hey, Dad, you got to handle it. I'm out of here. I'll be back.
I think that's
so whatever it is that you do.
Yeah, I think that's so important too, because some of our audience is stay-at-home moms or they work from home, and that is something that is really important to remember so that you don't lose yourself.
Yes, because you will, and then sometimes you have trouble finding yourself. I mean, that was probably one of the biggest struggles I ever went through.
Yeah,
it was like trying to find that identity and being the stay-at-home mom, because so many people, they look at themselves through what they do, not who they are.
Right.
And so then when you don't have that career, that thing, even though we always had a business and I had a part in that, it wasn't the same as working for somebody else and having a role and having a title and all that stuff. So don't lose yourself in all that stuff. Be who you want to be, even though you're the mom.
Yeah. You're not just the mom.
Don't be just the mom. Yeah. Exactly.
I think even then when you go to work all day, and I still think you have to struggle with the identity loss kind of thing, because you have to be in the zone from the hours, and then you go home and you're like
shifting.
You just feel like you're in a trance and then you're just sitting there trying to be in like this self-discovery, I guess, hour. You know what I'm saying? Like, what do I even do with myself? Or that's how I experience it. Or you just find
yourself like just trying to make it to bedtime.
Exactly.
But your kids all day. But everybody's human, and you do get tired.
And then guilt.
Yes, the guilt. Because my oldest son, one of the reasons that we stopped working. My husband is a little older than me, and he had a chance to take an early retirement. I was nowhere near ready to stop working. However, I had the guilt because our oldest son, he was raised in daycare, basically. I mean, we dropped him at daycare at 6 and 6:30 in the morning, didn't pick him up till 6:30 at night.
Yeah.
And that was his life. And so even though we sort of had no choice in the matter, you still, on those days when he didn't feel really good or getting him out of bed at 5:30, you have that guilt feeling. So there's that also.
Yeah.
And then so you have to sort of try to find some balance. It's hard though. It is hard sometimes to find balance. And I mean, like Caitlin, you guys have both have, you have a full-time job, and then you got to go home and be full-time mommy. And it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's a hard shift to make.
Yeah, it is.
So I don't think being home is necessarily any easier than not being home. That's just my opinion in experiencing both.
I do have experience with both too, and I would say the same thing. And just find whatever works best for you. So if you're not finding your fulfillment being the stay-at-home mom, then maybe you seek, if it's not good for your mental health, then you seek something else that is more fulfilling.
Yeah, 100%.
And then some people totally just love the feeling of being a stay-at-home mom, and they're fulfilled by all of that. If that's however you're wired, that's what you need to do. Whatever makes you feel good and confident, and you can get your stuff done. That's totally how I feel.
I know at the beginning of your tenure here, Lacey, you worked from home.
I did.
You worked remotely. And then when you came to work in the office full time, you're like, I don't even know how I did that.
Yeah. It's like you live in this life and you figure out, at first you're like, how am I going to get my work done being at home with these young children? So then you figure out that balance, and then you decide that this is really not for me. My kids are bigger now. They can go to daycare and I feel good about it. So I've transitioned to work, and now when I do work at home, I'm like, how did I ever do this? Like,
anything
I need that 8 hours of like just work mentality, And it helps too. For me, it helps too. Whenever I do get home, I'm not work all the time. I can let go of that for an hour or two while they're still awake and be with them.
I think so too. I think that's important too. Is when you're with them, you got to be focused on them.
Yeah.
Because they need that. I mean, it's
and they feel it.
They do. They know. They absolutely.
I mean, obviously, when they get a little bigger, they don't really care if you're focused on them or not.
No,
they would probably prefer you not to be.
And all the things.
Yes, they would. I hope mom didn't notice me doing that. Exactly.
What are you doing? Nothing.
Yes. My mom used to catch me in everything. I could not get away with one thing. And that's what my friends used to say is, oh no, your mom's coming. You can't come because your mom's going to catch us. Like that's what they would say. Because she wasn't the kind of mom that would just catch me and be like, no, you're in trouble. We're going home, whatever it was. She'd be like, okay, all your friends load up. We're going to tell all your mothers. They hated that, which I would have too. I hated it. But
I was kind of like that.
But I appreciate it now. But, then you hate it.
I think this is the best podcast yet.
Oh,
I mean, you've given a lot of information here. In our parting words, what's your best advice you could give someone who's starting their career, and even as a woman in a hard industry, male dominated? What's your best advice you could give them?
You can do it. I mean, you can. There's not one thing guys can do that you can't do. And I mean, this is a physical, but it's also sort of a rhetorical thing. Is leverage. Use your leverage. Use what you have. Like, you might not be able to pick up that thing that guy can pick up. Find a way to get it picked up off the floor, whatever. And that's, like I said, that's not necessarily just the physically meaning that you find a way to get it done. That you have the ability to do anything that they have the ability to do, and don't let anybody down you because you're a woman. Your brain can understand the same concepts the male brain can understand, and you have the ability to learn those things. And sometimes I think you'll be rewarded for it if you take it and run with it. But don't expect things to be given to you, because some days it's going to be hard. You got to get through the hard days.
Right. Perfect. Yes.
Well, I really enjoyed this today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. We enjoyed it.
Everyone joining us today, be sure you like and follow and subscribe everywhere you view your podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.